So we're going to go on to the next game right now. And this is going to be Infernals versus Infernals. So Infernals versus Infernals, we're going to find it plays a very different. Okay, they're going to show off. They're going to have some interviews. They're going to talk. They're going to show Asmongold's face, his like resting, curious face. Like usually the face he has when he hears something that's either like very difficult to parse or understand the first time through, or he's about to just hit someone with rage. I feel so bad for these people, by the way. Here we go. So I want to get, when we get into this, for those of you who haven't watched it yet, I want you to understand when they're doing the cast for game one, Moon and Grubby, not Grubby, she's wrong game entirely. When they're doing the cast, as I load, yeah, when they're doing the cast, Doom and or rather Moon and Mana, their positions are reversed. Okay, so Moon is actually the player on the upper right hand side here, and Mana is the player on the bottom left hand side, right? So I want to note a couple of things. This map already just screams, oh my gosh, Cloud Kingdom to me. It looks like Cloud Kingdom, and if you look at where the the spawn vision towers are, it feels like Cloud Kingdom to me. It feels like, oh, you can go out, there's a natural, but you can go out here, and then look, there's a third base that you can take. Now, I want to note something. We are watching an Infernals versus Infernals game. Previously, I talked about how Infernals versus Vanguard feels very much like in Little Wargame, Rax versus Beast, right? The Rax race, the Barracks race, the strong stand and deliver faction in this case, the Infernals, they want to guard all their weak points, make sure they can't get hit by a bunch of stupid run-bys, and then stand and deliver and crush everything, and then have a good day. So I've already watched these games, but then we're going to talk about Infernal versus Infernal. In this vein, it reminds me of Rax versus Rax, in that in Barracks versus Barracks, you tip. Now, this is the difference between how Infernals work with their Iron Vaults, right, and how Barracks work in Little Wargame and in other games. So in Infernals versus Infernals, you have to remember that their Barracks unit, their structure that makes like default units, it comes with a set number of charges, and then you can expend one to instantly make the unit. Also, remember how I said Infernals versus, Infernals against Vanguard, they're the stand and deliver faction? Well, the same thing that makes Shroud good for you defensively also now makes it good for your opponent offensively. I have not seen any indication that you don't gain Shroud when you're on your opponent's team. You don't gain, like, when you're on Shroud, you don't gain Veil. Veil is the white health bar. That's what I'm calling it. I'm going to make sure other people call it that. It's the right name for it. Like, it's thematically appropriate, right? They came from beyond. We're just going to call it Veil. The white health bar, as it were. Now, here's the thing. In Rax versus Rax, because your units build on a normal queue time in Little Wargame, the person who makes more barracks first before the third tends to be losing. That matchup tends to look like you either make fast aggro units called the Raiders, or you make some defensive units that sit there and laugh as your opponent tries to attack you. Then both of you go to a third base, and then you make barracks. And the reason is you can't do like 2 barracks and then push your opponent because production times are slow and they're traditional in Little Wargame for the stand and deliver faction. So if I make a barracks and you make a castle, units are so tanky, including workers and buildings, that you're not going to do enough damage for me for it to matter. That looks completely different in Stormgate, and the reason is that the production is flipped on its head. Because you get, when you make the building, a set number of charges and they rebuild over time, it actually looks like you want, and because your Veil recovers on both sides of the Shroud, right? It looks like actually you want to be the person who, like, you are actually safer making more. It's also worth mentioning that you're not ever gonna not need them. Now they talk about in the cast about how Infernal versus Infernal. Again, keep in mind that this is Moon in the top right hand side. They talk about how in the cast, how Mass Fiend strategies seem pretty good, but we did see in the previous game that Infernals have the Magmadon, which every third attack deals AoE damage to units. I'm gonna tell you okay, so in Little Wargame Barracks versus Barracks, if you're not careful and you both like decide to mess around with mass archers, the basic ranged unit, kind of like a marine, kind of like a gaunt. It's more like a gaunt in this game than a marine. a little less like an Exo, more like a Gaunt, then if you screw around with that game too much, people just make mages and fireball you to death. I'm worried that the same thing would happen with Magmadon, so let's take a look at what we've got. Yep, they're going to fast expand. I actually think aggressive plays are probably better in Infernal, because if their Shroud regenerates your Veil, then they're just like, that could be really bad for them. And that could be really, really bad for them. Like, especially since Iron Vaults, I don't know if there is a requirement on how far away from your base you can place these to avoid proxies. Again, I suspect that they're playing under gentlemen's rules, that we're not going to just one base rush each other, right? We're going to have a full game. We're going to show people what's going on, especially since, and this is not a conspiracy theory or anything like this, but especially since you consider that this video is 1 hour and 53 minutes long. I'm not guaranteeing that anyone had a 2-hour time slot. It just seems likely that they had a 2 max 3-hour time slot, right? So they wanted to hit the minimum, not the maximum. So there's 3 Iron Vaults going down over here for mana, because, the nameplates are swapped. And there's 2 over here, 2 Iron Vaults over here. And typically, okay, in Rex versus Rex, you would say that the person who has the fewest production facilities is trying to expand faster. And it looks like that's what Moon's doing, actually. It looks like Moon is trying to set up the meat farm with the Fell Hogs, by the way. I couldn't remember the name, but the Fell Hogs are the little dudes that are right there, 90-45 base units. Cool little things, right? But it looks like the Fell Hogs, like, he's trying to set those up so that he can have safe Therium for his natural and then go back and take a third. Whereas this is a more... Are you okay? Stella! Hey! That's okay. Come here, you. Come here, cat. All right. Stella, come here. Come here. You wanted to say hi. We're saying hi. Yep. Oh, you're going to suffer through getting pets and everything. It's going to be the worst thing ever. You'll never be able to recover. Emotional damage. All right. There we go. So, 3 Iron Vaults versus 2, and your Shroud heals me. So it looks like the defensive play here, I would be willing to bet that the Infernals work themselves out in a faction, or in a fashion somewhat similar to Gateways, and that it's, you need this number to be safe, but you could still die to this all in. But if you make this number, then it's less efficient than this number. So it's not that you have to guess, but that probably needs a lot of work to be figured out. And 3 just makes sense, especially since, like I said, if these brutes on death get you fiends that then recover on your opponent's Shroud, they get their Veil back on your opponent's Shroud, then I could see how this gets really bad really fast. So Moon on the upper right-hand side is just going to get completely surrounded right here by mana. That's really unfortunate. And again, I've mentioned this on a previous talk, but it seems like the units become uncontrollable or lose collision, or not uncontrollable. They lose vision, or they fly, or some action like that gets taken when the brute breaks out into 2 units. I'd be very surprised if that can't be used to cheese walls or tower, like walls, towers, pathfinding in some way, hills, etc. There is a meat farm right here to help defend, but I'm not convinced that this meat farm is really doing a whole lot of helping, especially since these brutes look like they just, Mana's brutes just walk right in. And at any time, if necessary, they can split. So what's interesting here is also there's not an overcharge or a Bob-like mechanic, right? Also something to think about. I'd be willing to bet that this is less effective the more bases the fewer bases your opponent has, because meat farms make the Fell Hogs. Right? And so that if you don't have, I'd be willing to bet, because this is made by the people of StarCraft 2, that your shrine or your greater shrine actually gives you some supply. And so if you're not getting supply from the shrine, then you need more meat farms. That means you have more fell hogs. That means you're more likely to defend without needing a shroud stone or something like. I also am a bit willing to bet that Moon just did not think that this was actually like a hellacious, like a possibility. All right, let's see. Okay, so here we go. I just want to see. Mana's got some guys on here, and I think they're getting, yeah, it looks like they're getting Veil back, which means that aggro is actually very good. Like, being on your opponent's side and damaging them is very, very good in this matchup. And so, what that means is it's probably very cheesy, if I'm being honest. Like, if your Veil recovers on their Shroud, this is probably an extremely cheesy match. Like if I were to get in day one, I'm pretty sure if I were to play Infernals, which will never happen, but day one, if I were to play Infernals, I would just go like get completely cheesed out by someone just dropping Iron Vaults right outside of my base. Yeah, because the tool that helps is the tool, like the tool that defends and the tool that helps being the same is kind of painful. It does look like it's micro intensive though. I actually wonder how useful those Fell Hogs are. If you look at the fact that Fiends are 60-30, right? And Fell Hogs are... Come on. Come on. We could go back and see how much they are, but they're more than 60-30. They look like they were 150 or 120-60, right? I'm sure they help. It's just that brutes don't give a care in the world, right? They just slam through. And this is actually why this goes more effectively than it should. Is I think Moon assumed that he was okay after the first wave of attacks, right? So this is good on, this is the kind of instinct that I personally don't have, but this is good on Mana. Again, Mana's in the bottom left, the names are flipped. Because you can use aggression to figure out what your opponent's plan is, right? If your opponent is cleanly defending this, or like with minor struggles defending this, they probably put down another Iron Vault. They probably, or they have a Shroud Stone, right, or something like that. Then there's just not more damage to get done, right? You're just kind of done. And the fact that he's able to get more accomplished here shows that Moon actually went for the third base faster. Yep. And anytime the brutes get weak, you just split them off, and then that's a micro tax on your opponent. And then we even see some damage go on down here. I would have loved, actually, I think a Shroud Stone did get killed already, but I don't even know if an earlier Shroud Stone would have helped, because he's not exactly standing on the front lines, but I think behind the meat farm would have been okay. We saw that in the TLO Mana series, right? Um, where there was a meat farm with the Shroud Stone that made it less likely that you could actually break through because there was a Fell Hog, and I'd be willing to bet part of the reason that's put together is, one, you need it anyways, but two, you're probably making a semi-wall around your Shroud Stone, and then the other benefit of doing this is that you're adding in units in the Fell Hogs that can block and body block. You can't control them, true, but what you can do is let your opponent not focus them, or not focus the Shroud Stone to hit them. So that effectively, the Fell Hogs are giving the Shroud Stone more effective health, which means that it can deal more damage. I'm also be willing to bet, given that no one has done it, that it is actually very hard to take out these meat farms. I mean, we saw, I think it was 900 health. 900 health is 30 brute hits, assuming there's no armor. No one's going to be doing that, right? It's like in the little I know of Warcraft 3 is that if someone has a farm in the middle of nowhere, don't waste your time killing it. There's like a billion other things that you could be doing with your time. That's the rule of thumb, anyways. That's not true for every instance. Yep. And so finally, it looks like finally some of the harassment is going to end, but keep note that there are purple dots over in the main base of Moon. He still has to deal with the nightmare scenario known as Fiends coming in. Yes, they're 30-60, but he's fighting workers that are themselves pretty weak and can definitely not attack as quickly. But he finally decides to back off so they can get more stuff. He's got his own meat farms. And also, during all this time, I want to stress, he finally took his third. And so, mana now is equal to Moon's economy, except Moon has lost Shroudstone, lost some Fell Hogs, lost some of the ticks, as it were, on his Iron Vaults. And it's not that that didn't happen over there on the side of the aggressor, but it's one of those things like I've heard this about MMA is that if you're watching someone and they're on the ground, it can always look like the person on the ground is losing, right? It's true, but most of the time they are, right? Right? Like, because we have that expectation, because most of the time in our lives we know that if someone's on the ground and there's a person on top of them, it's very rare that the person who's on the ground is winning, right? And so something similar here. It's not always that the aggressor is winning. They are just setting the pace, but that was not a clean defense over there by Moon. There was some real damage done by Mana and a lot of micro attention. And also, there is safety, right? This is something that's talked about in fighting games a lot, where how come when I play this person, I'm doing great, but when you play that person, they're screwing everything up? Well, it's because the pressure that you're putting on them encourages them to make more mistakes, make them look worse than they are. And this is looking really good, actually, for Mana. Again, the cast has got it, production's got it flipped for Mana, because he got his third base without having to worry about defense. There was no chance to worry about defense really for Moon on this base that we're looking at right now in the observer cam, but he did have to worry about his natural and the defense and the positioning, and there was a very real chance of losing the game right there because he did start off with fewer Iron Vaults. And so I suspect this matchup continues into a lot of brutes, because brutes are... Stella, are you having fun with the tree? Are you having fun with the tree? Just the tree skirt? Well, you are a female cat, so fine. You can enjoy a tree skirt, I guess. So, I suspect this matchup is because of the Magtheridon doing AoE on every 3 attacks, and it looks like that was gotten into pretty easily in a 10-minute game by both players in multiple matchups. I actually suspect that Mass Fiend wouldn't be that good purely from a front army fight scenario. Seem good for surrounding, right? And they seem good for harass against Infernal, specifically because you get your Veil back from your opponent's Shroud, right? You both recover the resource. Yep, and this is actually going to be, this is the play that actually ends the game. I want to stress here, right, that the reason that this works is that there were a lot of losses taken over on the part. Here, let's back up a little bit. I was talking to my cat, of all things. So, in this fight right here, we're actually going to see that Moon is going to get some of his brutes like taken out or forced to expend. The body blocking here is actually very good on the part of Mana and able to catch these units. Now, I want you to know something that happens when your game is not quite as fast-paced as StarCraft, although it does happen in that game too, is that movement speed follows laws, right? It's not a joke, it's not an accident. It's not like, and then suddenly they were there. There's nothing like that. Movement speed follows laws of gameplay. So I want you to note that right here, right? I can't click it on the screen, but you can see like right here. You know, you what? 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 Excuse me, sir. Dreamhack. Thank you. Game? Well, that's a little embarrassing. So I want you to note, I was trying to click something off of here, then I did it over there, whatever. Right, okay, you can see my screen again. You see the purple right here? That's Mana, by the way. So Mana just had a fight in which he encouraged Moon's units to run away. So Mana is going to now have position because he's got the same units, right? He has Brutes and Fiends. He can move those units over here, hooking to the right and then up faster than his opponent can hook back through and down, right? Especially since Moon was on the losing side of this, so Mana gets to kind of dictate. He gets to, so he took a play, so Mana took a play and now he gets to have action. He has the agency of a play. And while this is going around, I don't really know what for what purpose. Like to go over here and down, I suspect is what Moon is doing. Mana is just going to go and completely Shrek the shrine that is right here. There is no defense. There's no Shroud Stone. There's no meat farm. There's no nothing. And I suspect that he actually favors the DPS. Yeah, now, notice here what also happened is that Moon had to shatter all of his brutes into fiends to get here and defend the base. And note that if this base doesn't go down, this is fantastic. Even if this lives with like 5 hit points, it's perfect because your boy over here, Mana, is sacrificing all of the brutes and he's cashing in on the reward of having won all those small fights and forced pressure at the natural. If he doesn't get this, it's really bad. He's basically reset the army for no advantage, but notice it does go down. Now, will these fiends escape? I mean, some of them will escape. Oh, okay, the Magmadon has come in. The Magmadon, by the way, is going to not only hit and stun all of these fiends so that they don't escape, right, so that few of them escape, but this is fine because these units right here, these fiends, again, these are 60-30 units, right? 60 health, 30 veil. They're not exactly going to get a whole lot of work done. And the conclaves that are down over here on the bottom side for mana, I suspect are for gaunts. And gaunts now add a new dynamic, which is that the brutes want to stand and fight, but there's always the macro, like the micro game of they could be split up into workers, and that could get really awkward, and maybe we don't want that. But if you have gaunts, these range units, now fiends are actually sick because fiends are just body blocking machines, right? They have a total that when they spawn, they provide 75 times 2 is 150 health, in addition to the 190 slash 95, but usually 195 that the brutes have. And so now the gaunts become the DPS unit. And this is very much something that happens in Little War Game with wolves and snakes. I've been saying this for years. I will continue to say this. In Wolf Snake versus, especially against Wolf Snake in that mirror matchup, you want enough wolves, enough of the melee attack units to stop up the front line. Everything else after that is gaunts, or in this game gaunts, in that game snakes. So let's go ahead. Magmadons just say they're done with the tree line. They decide to Fern Gully these people and escape from them. And now this is 3 base against, again, this is 3 base. So I do want to stress here that one of the reasons that was capable of happening, that play earlier, was I think Moon decided to grab this other 3rd base location. But the problem is that Mana has been the more aggressive player, has been winning out on trades the entire time. So this is kind of a pivotal moment of the game, right? The easily made 3rd, or the faster 3rd of Moon, was destroyed after the natural took a lot of hits that essentially made it very difficult to defend that 3rd base. Not impossible, but like a very difficult hold in any case. And so that was a cash in of Army and Fiends to make that 3rd base sack happen, while his own 3rd base has been up for a while and has been going smoothly. Now the 4th base is up. It's more of a replacement 3rd over here for Moon. This is where things get a little dicey. And the reason they get a little dicey is Mana sacrificed all of his brutes and all of his fiends to make the play happen over on the right-hand side, and it was successful. And now it's 3 base against 3 base, but he doesn't have the economy advantage. He's reset the economy, but he sacrificed his army to reset the economy, right? To reset any potential economic advantage. So now it's whether or not a 4th base, as the 3rd is now being reclaimed as the 4th over here for Moon. It's a question of, are you going to capture the 4th base? And there is no 4th base, so this is an indication, right? Also notice that we're seeing, again, I love that this game does this. We're seeing, again, the law of movement speed. So you see the fiends that are over here. They cleaned up those, the workers. And that was something that was in vision of Mana. So Mana now knows, even though not all of my units are fiends, I can go straight across the middle of the map and you're missing a dozen fiends. You can't get there in time, right? Because he's just going to cut through the center faster than his opponent is going to cut through the side. Now, there are Magmadons up here on the high ground, so there is potential for this to get really wonky, especially since this is kind of it for Moon, right? Remember how I said this could get dicey again? This is why. It's because sacrificing the army to offset the possible economic advantage means that now there's not a question of who has more bases, but it does mean that the economic advantage that was gained earlier from not dying and from having, now back on the full 3 base means that Moon actually has like 5 Magmadons here or something like that. Yeah, 5 Magmadons versus the 3 of his opponents. Their Veil isn't as good, but every 3 attacks they do AoE. So, like, if this fight starts going badly, it's going to get real bad. So, this is actually, again, like I said, this is still even-ish right now. This is still possible. I know it looks like it wasn't possible because Moon was on the receiving end of some mana-based pain. But this is off of Shroud. 3 base reset back to 3 base versus, and with the economic advantage of starting earlier, versus having taken some damage against a person who then sacrificed their whole army, right? So here we go. Now, this is actually like, so with this fight, this is basically the key fight of the game. And the reason this is the key fight of the game is, again, mana sacrificed his army. There's nothing left to kill the third. And then that means that, but the third was still gotten faster. So the Magmadons that we're seeing here that Moon has is the advantage that he has managed to retain through being on the defensive the entire game, right? That this is all of his ability to win the game right here. And I want you to note again, purple is mana, right? It's worth remembering. Unless they just fixed it, in which case that'll be interesting. So, yeah. So the problem here is that mana, I want you to go back and just look, but very quickly, where were all the sick Magmadons? Let's go back. So the Magmadons take fights with other Magmadons, but what's important is that on the upper left-hand side, there are a ton of Gaunts for mana, and it looks like I was right. Gaunts do damage. Now, they don't have hit points, but they do damage, and so you have 5 initiator stunning tanks, right, to try and catch stuff with some brutes on the top side. So these are Moon's brutes and Magmadon's interrupted, but the Magmadons can never quite get on the Gaunts. And you're going to see as the purple starts, you're going to see as the teal/blue, light blue starts disappearing, that, yeah, there were only 3 Magmadons for mana, the purple player again, but that's actually okay, right? And these Magmadons will never run away, actually, now. Yep. And so the problem here is that was a big fight with a big win, and now there's nothing left. All that Moon had was that he had gotten his third base faster, he had more Magmadons. He even took a favorable trade on the side to initiate, up from the high ground up to the upper left, but he couldn't get on the Gaunts, and the Gaunts now have the ability to just do a ton of damage. Like, we can see that the Magmadons themselves that still live for mana are very tanky. They are 480, 240 units, right? They're doing a lot of work, and then there are some fiends that are shrekking up the shrine over there. That shrine is down. And now this is how you know, I mean, the fight was how we knew the game was over, but this is the definite nail in the coffin, because the 4th base that was secretly the 3rd has now been wrecked again. And there we go. That's GG. All right. Time to zoom forward. We're going to go back into another Infernals match. This is the last match for Stormgate that we currently have access to. I mean, from Dreamhack Atlanta, at least. I mean, we're going to put all these on YouTube, and if you found something that was a little confusing or we want to go back over again, we can certainly do that. I'm also willing to answer any questions in chat if you have any. So, again, we're back on Secluded Grove, Infernal versus Infernal. Now, this should... Listen to my words. Listen, I've watched the game already. Okay, bear with me. This should be a very long game, right? If the game doesn't become one base like, cheese nonsense. The reason I say that, again, if you weren't, this is a different video, it's a different stream, but Infernal is the stand and deliver faction. They can put down a meat farm and a Shroudstone and defend a lot of stuff because they have Fell Hogs, and then Shroud is Veil, which improves their stuff and makes them more likely to get work done. That's true against Vanguard. It's less true against Infernals because you seem to get benefits from the Veil. You can seem to recover your Veil, the white armor bar, on your opponent's Shroud. But even so, the architecture of Secluded Grove says, just hold this spot. They fixed it, by the way, now. Mana is in the upper right. Just hold this spot if you're mana. Just hold that spot. But what about the spot over here? Okay, but just hold this spot and you have 3 bases, right? And then over here on the side, same thing for Moon. Just hold this spot. But, you know, if they Iron Vault each other and then watch that nonsense happen, you know, that could get really bad. So, down a game is Moon on the upper right-hand side. Oh, they just did the thing. Okay, cool. It's fixed now. We got it. We're back, boys. We're doing the thing. So the thing is here, I'm pretty sure that whoever splits into Fiends first loses, right? It just seems to be like they lose the fight. That doesn't mean they lose whatever their objective was they were going for, but they seem to lose the fight. I would suspect that expansion first. I haven't played it. I'll look to it, but I would suspect, given the way that Shroud works, that expansion first, not as good in the Infernal Mirror. Just a speculation, right? Just a guess. So we got Iron Vaults over here. I think they both open 2 Iron Vaults. Maybe they both open 3. It's worth seeing. Yep. All right, yeah, he's just grabbing a 3rd one, basically to make sure that the same thing that happened last game doesn't happen this time. And there's 2 here over on the part of mana. He's going to make a 3rd. It just took some time to get the resources. I am confused. I find it strange. I'll put it that way. I find it strange that they're not organizing their stuff so that it ramp blocks the top. I feel like that plus a Shroud Stone just makes your main safe for 10,000 years if the situation calls for it, or put it on the low ground, right? If you know you're going to be making 3 of these things, right? If you know you're going to be making 3 of these, like, don't you just put them down at the natural and then make that part of the defensive structure? Okay. There is something to think about here, is that also if you, on Secluded Grove, if you were to place the Iron Vaults closer to the ground, then the first, your first unit that comes out can hit the Therium and open it up a little bit faster. Good job, Brutes. Yep, 0-5. Well done. Yeah, I don't know what the advantage is of doing what Moon is doing, of putting it behind. I don't know what the advantage is of doing what Moon is doing by putting the Iron Vaults behind the ramp a little bit. In fact, here's another advantage of putting the Iron Vaults further down, is that you could go and grab the vision camps a little bit faster. I feel that if you're Moon and you know that you opened 3 of these, the fact that they're both giving each other respect indicates that Moon was perhaps being greedy last game or trying to do something clever or acute. I would also strongly suspect the right thing to do on this map is to creep out and then back in. The reason that you would creep out and then back in is that you can pull the units in. You see where poor Moon's, oh my gosh, oh no. You see where poor Moon's brutes are, right? Attacking this health camp and then moving down. If you wanted to attack the health camp, back, get the vision camp, then you can be at the health camp, and then maybe that allows you to take this as your 3rd, because you'll have the health camp for 4 minutes. And if the health camp is active for 4 minutes, that should give you enough time to do the play that we saw him do last game. In fact, I think that would have been a better plan overall. Unless the health camp is massively tankier than the vision camp. But Moon seemed to think that he could take it the first time through. And now we see that the delay of doing the health camp but not pulling back to the vision camp and not full committing to the health camp is buying a lot of struggle over here. Because in a base race scenario, it's always a question, how much do I send to my opponent? How much do I send to defend? I tend to be on the defend side. That's more my preference. But this is paradoxical, but you can defend and lose because you're defending. We've all played a game in an RTS where we have defended our bases, whatever they were, very well. But because we're defending and our opponent is expanding, we're not taking advantage of what pressure we can apply onto them. We see the Fiend split up over there. I'm going to try and get some damage done. I suspect they're a lot more effective at getting the damage done, actually, these Fiends, against the Infernal Workers than they are against the Human Vanguard, because Bobs are just so strong. Yeah, the health camp finally goes down over here. Unfortunately for Moon, it was Mana who took it over. I don't know if they've regenerated all of the health, but I want you to imagine that if Mana had, if Moon had attacked the health camp and then pulled back to Vision and then gone to their base, they would have killed the Vision camp at about the same time that they would have seen that their natural was under attack, and then they can take this third because the camp is held up for a while. Yep, and now we see that Moon is trying very hard here to go grab a third base, but that's not going to be allowed, and a third base is taken. This is, again, Mana taking the same place that he did against the Vanguard previously. I think it's for the same reason. You can just defend this little circle where my mouse is, and then you can have a lot of good action come your way, right? Because of the way that the map kind of splinters off. Wait a second, is that not... Wait a second, is that not... symmetrical? It's close. Okay. Okay. And as the Vision Camp is going to get captured over here for Moon on his opponent's side of the base, or against his opponent's side, he's going to be able to see what his opponent is up to. But I don't think he knows about the third quite yet. And his own attempt at a third was delayed and denied. And it's kind of hard to say why it was denied, other than that there was a solo worker just sent out by its lonesome to kind of do this. And that just gets punished. That just gets punished really hard. So now the game is in a really uncomfortable spot. I also disagree with with Moon's choice of third base here. So the reason is that the circumstance that I set up for the health camp is still possible. It still was good, but we're not in that circumstance anymore because Mana is actually the one who captured the health camp. And so now this health camp isn't active for you if you're Moon, right? And you're trying to take this third base and you have 2 points that you have to defend, right? Rather than going up to a 3-base economy and then being able to defend 2 points, you are now trying to defend 2 points as you are getting up to your third base economy. And we can see by the way that everything is broken down over here on this side for Moon, or for Mana rather, that Mana's third base is bustling, right? It's like a city bus, right? It's not missing its turn, right? That mode of transportation is not even 5 minutes late. He's got the passes. He's straight bustling. So the shrine is going to go up, but I don't think that it's going to actually resolve. Maybe it might. The Vision Camp, getting pulled over here could help. And so the Vision Camp now means that Mana is going to see what's going on. And so Moon is going to see what Mana is up to, but notice 1, 2, 3, 4 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus Gaunts. And Gaunts, I think, were an underrated or underexplored aspect for Moon. That Shroud Stone's not going up. This Shrine isn't going to go up. And as soon as this dies, like, the game is just over, by the way, at this point. I mean, poor Moon has tried to get a third base, was denied, and then his opponent did the same thing to him, and then it was counter set up as well. And all this is a consequence of when they had their pseudo race for the natural, in which there were way more economic damage was suffered over there on the part of Moon. I mean, Mana only had to start defending 20 seconds or so after his own attack began. It's a pretty good place to be, especially when, yeah, and now we see the attack that's going up here. The Shroud Stone is live, but it's only a quarter of the way through, and it is going to get melted, eviscerated, destructified, soul erasured, like verb nouned. It's going to get absolutely crushed into the dirt. And the problem is that actually, I don't think they expected that Shroud Stone to be that frail. I mean, we see this in LittleWarGame. People think that towers are good. Towers are very good in LittleWarGame. But that doesn't mean you could just put a tower up and it'll just do everything for you. You don't want towers tanking for you outside of some very specific circumstances, usually to deal with the surround, right? Usually the surround is in the context of you're going to trap and kill all of these units because your other forces are more than capable of doing that. And this is not that scenario. And the Shroud Stone is just going to get completely wrecked. Like these things do, like I said, brutes we saw in the melee creeping that happened earlier does 30 damage. Even if we assume that it's like Warcraft 3 armor types and it does less damage, it does 20 damage instead of 30, it just got completely just eaten alive. It's just a reckoning. Yep, and with the Shroud Stone gone and the Gaunts casting there, hey, if you die, we're just going to make your life hell. I mean, this isn't even necessary to actually end the game. Like, that sounds strange, but it's not even necessary. Like, all the damage here is so bad. The workers getting infested is actually the most terrifying thing, because if the workers get killed, then they start generating more things that kill the rest of the workers that generate more things. Like, oh, it's just the worst possible scenario. And there's just units streaming in here. I mean, Moon is going to have their workers come back, but the Infernals faction doesn't appear to have the same defensive tools like the overcharge that the Vanguard do. And so, yeah, they mentioned on the cast that the wall that was provided there actually makes it extremely unlikely that those workers units could now get out. I don't think that the wall is actually a bad idea, like to protect against that possibility of that area getting crushed by a Magmadon, but it just isn't. No, it's just not a thing, right? Probably want to pull it to the front because any amount of units that are soaked up, right? Any amount of damage that those buildings soak up is damage that your units aren't soaking up, and as long as your units aren't taking damage, you're recovering Veil. But yeah, the Greater Shrine is going to go down. There's some tech, but like, basically Moon is in this just for the sport of it, right? To make sure. And I think Mana actually had a better read on how to play this the entire time. Not just because he won, but because he seemed to say like, oh, but being aggressive is better. And whereas he shows a very different style Mana does in this Infernal's Mirror that he did in the game against Vanguard, against TLO. Right. He showed almost like a more defensive style. I know he was sending some fiends 6 at a time, but that wasn't really defensively done. That was more like it was defensive. This will sound weird, but you can attack defensively, right? He was more saying, "Are you sure you're not doing anything like too untoward? You're not getting a little too strange here. You're not doing anything that's like too damaging or awkward for me." And yep, there we go. And there's the GG. Mana actually takes the entire thing. He's happy. Like, he's going to get a giant Vulcan, a golden Vulcan statue. I hope it's not actually golden. I would be pissed if I were Moon in TLO. But yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, he was touted as being a top 10 player inside of the beta in the context of when this was played. So good for him. Shows some good games. We got 2 of the matchups. Would have liked to have seen Vanguard versus Vanguard. I suspect Vanguard versus Vanguard would be a very chaotic matchup to try and watch, right? Not, and it would also last a very long time because Bob Overcharge ×2 seems really good. That would probably be like we get the full complement of mech things, right, and towers and bunkers and everything else. So yeah, really well done, excellent. We're gonna cut it here and we're going to port this over to YouTube. Just gonna end on this smiling face over here, man. Good stuff, dude. All right, take care, everyone. That's all there is for Stormgate for now. And I'll probably go back to working on some Little Wargame codex, like work on my RPG. But that'll be after a brief break. All right. Take care, everyone.